Welcome to the Bentonville Film Festival.
Thank you.
I heard your film just did its screening. How was it?
It was great. You know, all the screenings are always the best part of the festival experience, when you get to connect with audiences and hear what the film meant to them. And this was a great audience. It was like a really full theater. Everyone was so enthusiastic. So feeling very warm and fuzzy inside.
Good. Tell us a little bit about your documentary, please.
Yeah, so it's called JOONAM, and it follows myself, my mother, and my grandmother, and each of our relationships to Iran. My mother grew up in Iran, and so did my grandmother, and my mother left in the 1970s, right before the Islamic regime came to power. I grew up in Vermont. I've never been to Iran. I don't speak the language fluently, and so a lot of the film is about sort of me discovering my family's stories that I never bothered to ask about, but also examining, my own fractured Iranian identity.
What made you want to do this?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I think, as you get older, you just naturally, as Americans, we're all from another place. And so, naturally starting to be more curious about this country and this homeland that I've never seen before. And for my whole life, it was like this lost city of Atlantis. Iran was on the news and it was in my family photographs, and, it was always too dangerous to go back. And so it's always existed in my psyche as, this like untouchable kingdom. And so it wasn't until I got older that I really started to, ask myself really, what is my relationship to Iran? Am I even Iranian if I've never been, if I can't speak the language? And it wasn't until my mom called me with these stories that my grandmother was starting to open up about later in her age that I thought this is the perfect opportunity to go home, talk to my family about their experiences, and then, a whole series of things happened that I didn't expect, but it was really coming from a more naive place than I think the film ends up.
Because you are a filmmaker, but you hadn't done a documentary before, had you?
It's my first feature film. This is my first foray into the documentary space. I worked in narrative TV and film before this as a set dresser or production designer, but this was definitely a departure from the things that I had done earlier. I come from like a fine art background. I went to school for illustration and painting, and so it's definitely it's been a learning curve the entire time, but it really feels like it fits me and how I tell stories. So.
And in a documentary, usually people can go one of two ways. They can either just tell the story of something that interests them, or they put themselves into it. There's a vulnerability there.
Yeah.
Didn't it scare you a little bit to be that vulnerable and open on something that's now forever available?
Yeah, I also edited the film, and so there was a level of comfort knowing that I was ultimately going to be crafting the story. And I also shot all the footage, and so there was a level of control there, definitely. But I don't think it was really until things became real for me that I was making the final decisions about what people were going to see in theaters that I started to feel that sense of, fear and vulnerability, because everything. When you're making something, there's so much time to make those decisions. And so it wasn't until things were really, getting down to the wire and we were about to premiere at Sundance. And so that's when I started to feel a little nervous. But, you have to be willing to be naked on screen in the same way that you're exposing your subjects. And so I really believed in putting myself out there, but it doesn't mean that it's comfortable.
How does your grandmother feel? Does she think you did okay?
Yeah, she actually passed away before she had the opportunity to see the final film. But she was always, she just had so much love in her heart, and she would do anything for me. And so, she was at a place in her life where she really wanted to share, and she, had that type of personality where my mother is more shy. She's an artist. She's more philosophical. She was really shying away from the camera, and my grandmother was always, turn the camera back on me. What are you doing filming over there when I'm over here, kind of thing. So she saw some early scenes and was really tickled to see herself on screen. And I think if she was here today, she would be really proud.
I do see a lot of her in your face.
Yeah.
'Cause I looked it all up, and I was researching the film, and I was like, you look like your grandmother.
Oh,
you
that's
really
so
do.
sweet. Yeah, I mean, she's such a beautiful woman. I take that as a huge compliment. Up until her final days, she was always so regal and put together. And so if I can even just have like a sliver of what she was able to pull off, I'll be happy.
I know ultimately you want this to be distributed. I think it's very universal because there's so, like you said, America's a country full of people that came from somewhere else. At the screenings, what kind of reception have you gotten? Have people come up with you saying, oh my God, I'm not from Iran, but this is my story?
Absolutely. It's been really sort of amazing for me to see all the different types of audiences and demographics that this film hits, because we're all immigrants in this country, or if you're indigenous, then you have your own relationship with like a past or a history that's been lost. And so anyone who's coming to the screening is coming from some sort of place of, oh yeah, my grandmother told these stories, or my mother, or we come from this place, and I never really had a chance to connect with it. And so it's been really moving to see all different walks of life, whether you're Iranian or Middle Eastern, or not at all, from a completely different part of the world. There's so much that people see in themselves in the film, but it's also such a story about these intergenerational dynamics, especially mother-daughter dynamics. And so everyone has a mother. And if you're a daughter coming into the space, I think a lot of people see themselves in, it's like a tender relationship, but it can be really contentious. You're vying for control of, who gets to tell what story, and, who's the master of their own narrative. And so I think like the humor and sort of that dynamic really connects with people, even if you're not really from an immigrant background.
And how long did you take to shoot it all?
It was about, I'd say it was about 2 years altogether of shooting. It was really, the bulk of the shooting was over the course of a summer in 2019 with my family. And then we had pickups on either side of that year. But it was really, it was mostly a really intensive period of shooting.
And you were the cinematographer. What did you shoot it on?
I shot it on a Sony FS7 and a tripod that's somewhat similar to this one. And it was really important for me to have a tripod so I can be both in front of the camera and behind the camera. And that, I think, really lended itself to the visual style that the film ultimately has. But it was really coming from a place of necessity that, I am doing it all. I'm filming, I'm doing the sound, I'm in the film, I'm trying to direct the film. And so I was trying to, allow my equipment to do as much as possible so that I could wear all these different hats.
Was it a multi-camera shoot or just a single camera?
Just a single camera.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's hard work.
It was, I was really in shape that year. I look back in pictures and I was like, oh yeah, my arms look good. I was really carrying a lot of heavy stuff.
Yes, you were.
Yeah.
So what are you going to be working on next?
Yeah, I have a couple of ideas in development and, pursuing directing and editing work in between projects. These things take so much out of you. I worked on this for 5 or 6 years. And so it's really a question of like, am I ready to give birth again, essentially, to the next thing? And so working on developing a few things and editing other people's work in between.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, it's amazing to be here. Bentonville has really opened my eyes. I've never been to Arkansas, and this is like a true shock. This place is beyond anything I could have imagined.
It's interesting.
It's very interesting.